What's up, everybody? We got Jake Ellis in the house. How are you, man?
Good, brother. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay, bro. You got a big week next week.
I do, mate. I do. We got our 26th installment of Once Upon a Time at the Melbourne Pavilion. We got a pretty big show, mate. We've got 12 pro fights, headlined with Joel Camilleri versus Sam Colombian.
Yep.
And and that semi-main event, which we basically got together last week, was Taylor Harris for the Australian title against Marguerite Butcher.
Wicked.
Mate, then 10 4-round fights underneath that.
Beautiful, beautiful. You excited for this one?
I am, mate. I am. We got.
Is it the biggest one yet, you'd say?
I don't know about the biggest one yet. I've had some pretty big ones over, the last sort of 3 to 5 years. But it's great to sort of have a main event like we have, number 4 versus number 5, Joel's 4 and Sam's number 5.
Yeah.
In a very, very rich division. The light middleweight division at the moment is probably the strongest division.
Definitely.
If you sort of throw in guys like Anthony Mundine and then you look at guys like Tim Tszyu, even realistically Jeff Horn, he's probably more going to settle at that light middleweight division. Very rich division. The winner out of this fight will be looking at a big money fight either next or the one after that. And it will sort of keep him relevant in the top 5 in Australia.
Yep. Okay. So you got Tim Tszyu, who's at the top of the pile there. Have you had much to do with him?
Yes. Well, we had Dwight Ritchie box him last.
Yep.
Dwight Ritchie and myself, we go back all the ways from probably 2006. He lived with my uncle for a few years there. He trained with him for the first 5 years of his career before he got sick. And then we've promoted him all the way through.
Yeah.
So we come real close. He suffered a pretty bad cut on his eyelid in round 3, made it really hard for him to see and stuff. So we're really like overall we're really impressed with his performance and how he went. But we did really think he could have won. Never easy in Sydney, but in saying that as well, overall we're really, really happy with how he performed. But just wasn't his night.
He's a tough guy though, from Shepparton, right?
He is, mate. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's a real tough guy. Tell us a bit about his story and where he's come from.
Well, he's the son of Darcy Ritchie, a very well-renowned Shepparton pro. He he trained with my Uncle Keith for the first 5 years of his career, and he's not much of a puncher, but he's got genius boxing IQ. Like he's very, very smart. Got that Lionel type style where he's very front foot heavy.
Right.
Likes to throw punches in bunches as opposed to sort of sit on one or set one up. And very, very entertaining to watch because he hasn't got a crazy knockout power. He could fight someone a level below him and still be really good on the eyes. A lot of punches thrown, a lot of bloody bleed. Pretty much gets cut, every fight. So the people love that sort of stuff. They that's what they really
he definitely
get behind.
is an entertaining fighter.
He is, mate. Yes.
Yeah. So what was it like for you? You were just telling me off air an interesting story about how you started promoting very young, and everyone who knows you knows that you're like probably the best young promoter in the game at the moment. What was it like for you starting out after VCE, as you said before? Tell us that story.
Well, I went in a little bit, bit naive, I'd say. No real boxing experience, no real financial backing. I had a little bit of a name, of course, my father being Lester Ellis. But overall, really just went in blind, mate. I was 18 years old, just finished VCE, 3 months out.
Just slightly there, man.
No worries. 3 months out of VCE. And just dived in head first. We done our first show at the Sunshine Rollerblading Rink, which actually, I believe Dwight Ritchie boxed on that card.
Really?
And Michael Zarafa actually turned pro that night. So on my debut promotion, we had Michael Zarafa's debut fight.
Wow.
And Dwight Ritchie won the state title that night against Benny Costello, and my cousin Heath Ellis headlined. And it was just a great night. We had about, I think about 500-600 people come. We thought we were going to lose a lot of money. It looked like we were going to lose a good chunk. And then, we sort of just scraped in there and maybe just under broke even. But it was a real good experience. And, mate, I loved it. I didn't really look back since. And then we just done another one 3 months later, another one after that 3 months later, and never looked back.
So when you were starting out like that, you're not kind of competing against guys who have been in the game for a very long time. And with all of the organising and the logistics and everything, it must have been a bit overwhelming and intimidating for you as a young fella.
Definitely, mate. Definitely. But early on, like I said, I come in a little bit naive. I didn't really know what to expect. So you can't really be scared of something you don't really know exists. Like you just sort of dive in. But after sort of a couple of months, I started learning that, there's obviously laws you need to stick by. There's ethics you need to stick by. And, my dad was a great sort of mentor for that. And also a guy named Mike Alchimura, who's by far the biggest manager in the country. And he really, really mentored me and sort of showed me the way. And, overall, we did get a few, financial scares, a few, fines early days because we just didn't really know what we were doing. Like I said, we're just really learning on the job. But overall, mate, like I said, by the time I sort of really got my head around the job at hand, I was already sort of like 4 or 5 shows in, and I really couldn't see myself doing anything else in my life. So, whatever challenges presented themselves, I just thought, just work, get over them, around them, through them, whatever sort of, whatever the case may be.
And you had a few pro fights yourself.
I did, mate. I've been boxing since I was a kid. My first fight was at 12 years old. Boxed all the way through and actually turned pro in 2012. More of a sort of a bit of a marketing ploy. I didn't really have, at that particular time, at 19 years of age, I didn't really have the a dream of being a world champion or anything like that. It was more of a case of we're really struggling for sponsors and just overall recognition. So I thought, you know what, maybe try and get a few fights in, try and really revive that side of things. And that was sort of the mentality behind that. I ended up having 2 pro fights for 2 wins. And yeah,
undefeated.
Yes, mate.
Retired
yes.
undefeated?
Yeah.
Or you're going to put the gloves back on?
Well, mate, it's crazy. Every time I walk past a mirror or see my reflection, I'm always shadow boxing and stuff. It never really leaves you, especially because I've been boxing since I was so young, know. And I never say never, but maybe one day.
You just catch the bug. Hey, I started boxing when I was 19 when I just moved to London, and I hooked up with my coach over there through the security guard at my work at this brewery I was working in.
Okay.
And man, never looked back. I was 110 kilos when I went over there, so I managed to lose a bunch of weight.
What do you weigh now?
I'm about 87 at the moment. Need to be, my dietitian's on my back. Need to be getting down because I'm fighting on the challenge in December.
Okay, yep. And how many of them have you done?
I've done 1 in the past.
Okay, so and that's your total fight experience?
Yeah, exactly. So I've been training for a while, but like just catching the bug of it is just like, it's just the best thing ever.
It is, mate.
And as you said,
one thing, once you've got it,
around.
you can't really, you never really get it out of your system. You know what I mean? That's why we see these fights. Look at Nigel Benn, 55 years old, hasn't boxed in 20 years, making a comeback against our own Saki Obika.
Wow.
So, it just, and I think every boxer, probably outside of Mayweather, always has that one fight too many. Right. You know what I mean? You sort of need to really, get hurt or knocked out or really have the book shut on you to really get your head around that this is over. You know what I mean? So
right, exactly. So are you still training? You're still sparring and everything at the moment?
Bits of pieces, mate. Bits of pieces. Not really, religiously or anything like that. But I do tend to try and keep fit. Yeah.
Nice. What was it like? So you must have caught the bug real early then, because obviously your old man's a legend of Australian boxing. What was it like for you growing up amongst that?
Yeah, not bad. I had its challenges too. I grew up in a sort of lower part of town, a place called St Albans. And
represent.
Yeah. And mate, it's at times it sort of saved the day, you know what I mean? It sort of like anyone that sort of tried to pick on me or whatnot. A couple got intimidated by that fact, and a couple sort of egged them on, you know what I mean? Thought, and I was always a very small kid. At year 8, my first fight was at 39 kilos. So I was a real tiny kid. So probably an easy target, but in saying that, I was never really bullied or anything, but we would get in our fair share of sort of altercations and whatnot. Very multicultural school too, a lot of Africans, Islanders, Asians, Europeans and that sort of stuff. So there was a lot of that type of conflict as well.
No, I get that. I went to Maribyrnong for a year.
Okay.
Just in Footscray there.
Yep.
And I get that. Like, there's can be a little bit of a divide sometimes.
Yes.
But,
yeah. And a lot of them are obviously first generations Australians. They're not necessarily been here for 3-4 generations, so they're sort of still predominantly recognise themselves as that part of the world. You know what I mean? So we had a few altercations, but overall, mate, it was a good childhood. I thought, a few times, even in the boxing, my life was a little bit harder because of my dad, who he was, and even sometimes it was a little bit easier, whether it was the judges, or the way I was matched, or the kids not wanting to fight me because they thought I was going to be some superstar because I'm my dad's son, so either way, there was perks and also negatives also.
Yeah. What's your sort of memories from your dad's boxing career? How do you see that?
Well, I don't have any. I've only sort of seen him. He kickboxed towards the later end of his career. He had about half a dozen of them, and Anthony Mundine. They were the only fights I've ever seen. He retired in 1996 against Calvin Grove, the guy that knocked out Jeff Fennick, and he did, and that was in 96. I was 4 years old, so I don't really remember that. And then his last fight was against Anthony Mundine in 2002, which I was a little bit older, and I think I was about 12 years old. So I remember that. That was at the at the old Telstra Dome or Vodafone Arena, or one of them.
Dome. I remember
one of them.
Telstra Dome.
One of them, yeah. And it was grouse, man. Like obviously, my old man didn't win. He was nearly 40 years old and fighting at super middleweight, which is obviously a featherweight. But it was a great experience, and I loved it.
Did he have much to do with you when you were like doing your pro fights?
Not really. There's not really big on the boxing anymore. But my uncle Keith, like his trainer. He was there all the way for me, and my his father, my dad's father, my grandpa, he was at all my fights. Took me to training every day since I was a youngster, and but my old man always, he'd sort of give his take on a few things, and get me on the pads at least sort of half a dozen times per camp. But overall, didn't really get involved in the management, picking fights, or even really like the development of me as an athlete. Didn't really get involved in that much. Nah.
Yeah, right. So you added your pro fights, and then tell us a bit about Team Ellis and Ellis Gym and how that's all come to be.
Well, mate, it was just more of an idea, bit of a dream, and at the start, like any dream, it was very difficult. My first year promoting, I think for the year I ended up about 25, 30 grand in the hole. And again, like I had no job, no savings, my mum and dad, some people thought, they were loaded, but they were not. Like they were, they never were. My dad went bankrupt. We're in the early stages of my life. And from there, you only had 2 more fights. So, they weren't, that alone wasn't going to make us sort of get back to where he was. But, so I didn't really have any of that coming in, no real uni degree or anything like that. Again, no real business experience at all, if anything. So, the first year was tough learning on the job. And then sort of through the end of sort of 2012, we moved venues maybe 3 or 4 times around the western suburbs. And then luckily enough in 2015, we got with Brian at the Melbourne Pavilion. Yes, Brian Armatuda, yep. And obviously, he was an inspiration to me when I first started, and
he
all the way through.
He spoke very highly of you when he was on the podcast a few weeks ago. Said
Awesome,
you're doing
mate.
a great job.
Awesome. Well, we work very, very close now. Like the last sort of better end half a decade, we've been, juggling boys. Sam Colombian, who's fighting Joel, he put him on. Taylor Harris, the way she got about being on our card was he was having a card on October 11th that he's pushed back a little bit. So he's basically picked up that fight on his show, put it straight on mine. So, we work real close in hand. And
he must be a good sort of guy to lean on, or a role model in
100%,
some ways.
100%, mate. And a guy that, lets his actions do the talking. You know what I mean? You can just look at some of his results, and that alone inspires you, never mind some of the conversations we have. He's a wealth of knowledge in business. He's a wealth of knowledge in boxing too, but business, mate, there's no one I've really spoken to that has ever sort of surpassed him. And he's actually the one that got me onto open up my head to potentially opening up a gym and running like corporate shows and all that, because early days, maybe 3 years ago, I was talking to him about doing a big Hisense show. I want to get to the next level, because we've been, filling out the Melbourne Pavilion now for, since we moved in there, since our first show. So my whole thing was, what's the next step? And he was the one to sort of say, mate, sit back and, get your head around these amateur events and this sort of stuff, and open up a gym and sort of really lay your foundation before you look at doing something like that. Because, in a big Hisense show, you could lose, $500,000, $1 million in a night.
It's good and you don't want to have, but you want to make sure you lay the foundation.
And you want to have 3-4 bullets in the gun. Just like my first year, like I just told you, my first couple of shows, I pretty much lost on all of them, and one was a big loss. So, you don't really want to be in that position at that next level, especially for someone like me. I'm only 27, just sort of, still developing, you don't really want to be stuck in that sort of spot, especially 3 years ago. So yeah, mate, that's sort of how that all came about. And we started off in 2011, again, at the Sunshine Rollerblade Ring. We've done a few shows there, moved on to a place called the La Mirage in Somerton. We've done a few shows in, a few other venues. And like I said, we're lucky enough to get in the Pavilion and never really look back, mate.
Yeah, it's a great venue there, man. I love it. I was at the Pavilion on Friday night, actually. Yeah. Just watching the Eternal MMA. Did you? Okay,
yeah. Was that their first show there, or?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That was cool. And I was at the boxing a few times as well when it went down one of the times I was there.
It was unfortunate. It was unfortunate when that
these
whole ordeal happened. We were the next show, so we were 2 weeks later.
That sort of stuff, it kind of gives it a bit of a bad rap, and then that's the only thing you see on media, but you don't see all of the good things that come out of these shows and all the people turning their lives around. You know what I mean? Like it's like Colombian's a good example of that. Tell us about him, man.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, well. Mate, well, actually, to go back and touch on what you said, that night when all the dramas happened at the venue, we were the next show. So we were like the weekend after. And you know yourself, mate, most of the boxing fans and whatnot, they don't really care if it was Brian's night, my night, Paul's night, or anything. It doesn't really matter. It's that venue is scary or whatever it may be. And, we did sort of see a big drop like that sort of show, in that sort of event did hurt us just a little bit. But, the show after we've done a show, 2 shows since, and, we haven't really seen any repercussions for that at all. So that's basically, it's all back to normal now. It's all flush out of people's minds.
I've never even seen a scuffle there, let alone.
Never, mate. At any of our shows, especially, and I've got Brian's as well. And I've been to guys like Joe Nader does shows out of there, Hex. Mate, there's never anything.
You just
know what
get
I mean?
respectful people there all the time. And it's a great setup with the tables and then the booths. It's extremely classy. And then you have something like that happens and it's just such a dampener, unfortunately.
It is. And it's sad because, boxing has always had a bit of that, gangster stench a little bit. You know what I mean?
Definitely a stigma.
And it's what sort of hurts us with, a lot of government funding and that. Like me, myself, I've never received $1 from any government body, any financial support or any support in any way. I've never received. It's always just come out of my own pocket, and that's the same with most promoters, unless it was the Bendigo show where, the council got behind it and, the Jeff Horns Raffin night. But very rarely, unless you're bringing out like a Manny Pacquiao or something like that, does the government even get behind you at all. Actually, in the 80s, the Australian government made it very clear that they would never do anything to promote the sport of boxing.
Wow.
Because they viewed it as a blood sport. And since then, you see it. We never get on any networks. We never get no notoriety. The only time we're ever in the paper is when for a negative, reason. And, it's very, very sad because I think, the culture in Australia, especially at the moment, a lot of immigrants coming in, mate, we all talk a universal language in fighting. We all sort of can understand that. And no matter what, whether you come from a violent, country, third world country, whatever it may be, I believe a lot of the answers to all these issues is a positive sort of outlet. You know what I mean? So it's just sort of sad to see. I actually
was watching, just sorry to cut you off there, but I was watching Judd Reed documentary. Do you know Judd Reed?
No.
He's a really good martial artist, quite a famous martial artist. And he has a documentary where he fights 100 men and it's just this amazing training thing. And they were saying in that if everyone did karate, there'd be no war.
Yeah.
And I really, really do
no need for a war.
That sentiment.
I'm telling you, mate, you with the morals they install in you, mate, it's crazy. And you would see it so many times with the with your FightFit challenges, and I see it with the corporate shows where, you just see average people that you don't really, from the outside looking in, you couldn't really tell how this is going to affect their lives, but every one of them, mate, they say, it helps, your mental health, physical, just the stories you hear, and you would hear it.
Relationships, your sleep,
my God,
your diet,
mate.
your motivation.
Confidence. The list just goes on and on. And that's everyday people doing this sort of stuff. So
those are the things that people don't see, unfortunately. I wish that was more present in terms of the combat sports scene.
100%. And even I wish it was more present in our youth, in our everyday culture, in our schools, you know what I mean? Where we see nothing like that. Matter of fact, our amateurs, so the guys going out fighting for us in the Olympics, in the Commonwealth Games, all these.
And the nationals in Russia.
Yeah, they have to pay their own way. The government doesn't even pay for them. Remember, these guys are in the AIS like every other sport. Every other sport gets compensated one way or another. These blokes are going to Russia, getting spat on, F you Aussies. And not only that, then fighting guys with 150, 200 fights, which they're sitting there with 20 fights because their amateur system so rich compared to ours, and ours is that neglected. So it's all against them, and they're paying their own way to be there. And then on top of it all, 9 times out of 10, they get a dodgy decision. And then we wonder why, the sports has had its time where it's dimmered, throughout the years. It's because, at the grassroots, there's no support at all. And these are with kids. So it doesn't take much, kids are fickle and that, it doesn't take much for them to just say, stuff it, I'll go try footy or something, So
100%, yeah. And, when I was living in London, the amateur guys over there, they actually get looked after over there, and they want their amateurs to go to the Olympics and represent the world, represent their country on the world stage. And unfortunately, our amateurs just fall down in that regard because they're not as well looked after as some of the other countries.
Absolutely.
But we've got some serious talent though. Were you watching the Russian World Championships
Sure
recently?
was, mate. That Justice, mate.
honey.
He's and I've heard representing for the last few years now, and mate, he's a phenomenal talent. It's a spew he got sick because he ended up getting a bronze, didn't he?
Yeah.
He still got a bronze.
Yeah.
And it was a spew because
he was going to fight that Kazakhstani number 1. That's a scary dude.
It's a scary fight. Probably an odds-on favourite to lose that fight, but I mean, mate, he was on a roll. He's confident at the moment, and he's young, and I mean, mate, anything could have happened. I think he could have won that fight. But in saying that, that's boxing for you. There is no real subs. It's not a team sport. Something happens. You get sick. You can't exactly sub your mate on jump in for you. It's over. The whole his whole lead up to it. He probably spent the better part of the last 24 months focusing on just that tournament. And I think a stomach bug. Just undone him.
It's just devastating, is it, to see that, like a stomach bug, and then you see my mate Jason Mallier as well was over there, and he unfortunately fought the silver medalist from the last Olympics, and I thought that he could have got that decision. He fought really well, but didn't get there. Harry Garside, he won his first 1 or 2 fights. I think he won his first 2 fights.
I'm a big fan of both them boys. Jason Mallier and Harry Garside. I'd love to turn them both pro. Yeah.
Unfortunately,
it's tough. It's tough, and especially when you're fighting the Russians in Russia or whatever it may be. And every time you leave Australia, it's always going to be you're always going to be up against it. And again, nothing's harder to score than a fight, because there's no real black and white way to score it. It's not like you hit this piece of rubber between those 2 sticks and that's going to mean this many points. It's some people like some judges like work rate. Some judges like power punching, domination, coming forward. There's just 1,000 different sort of factors that go into a fight, and it makes it, gives it that gray zone. And it's sort of, it's just really hard to sort of, get give the win to the right guy every time, especially, if there's any type of, corruption or favoritism going on. It's very easy to stay in that murky area and, I liked him because he was coming forward, even though he didn't really land much or whatnot. But, he was aggressive, and that's why I gave it to him. And you can't really argue with that. You know what I mean? So it's tough. And over the years, you see it every Olympic Games, there's a new set of rules. Then they 3 judges to 5 judges. Then it was every clean headshot. Now it's a 10-9 system. And it just keeps changing. It changes probably 2-3 times within the 4 years of the Olympic Games, where you see guys training in certain styles to work in one particular system. By the time the Olympic Games comes, they're a completely different style. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah,
I
mate.
thought our Aussies really represented us well in that World Championships, though.
They did,
especially
mate.
For Justice to get up there and get a bronze medal.
Yeah, and I think he's leading the pack slightly. I think Jason Mallier and Harry Garside are 2 phenomenal talents too. Harry Garside actually boxed my little brother twice. They boxed. So I've known Harry Garside since he was a youngster, I think about 13. And Jason Mallier.
Slick, Harry.
Oh, he's solid, man. And
slick,
it was crazy when he was a kid. He used to come forward and bang. Now he's sort of upright, sort of slick boxer, which would work a lot better for him in the amateurs.
I follow him on Instagram. I haven't met him yet, but I follow him on Insta, and he's very dedicated as well. You look at and he was showing us around his bedroom today, and he's got like all of his heroes on his wall. He's got all like the stay accountable thing, like just everything to get him going. He does ballet
Z-line focused
as well, so it looks like he's taking all the steps, and he's going to be a really, really big talent to watch out in the pros one day.
I think so, and he will develop into a good pro. Looking at him, his last 2 years, you might see his style and say, "Oh, I don't know how well that's going to blend into the pros." But I remember him as a youngster, mate. He can punch. He can sort of stand there and bang too. He's got it all. He's this sort of predominantly an upright boxer at the moment, because that's what works in the amateurs. You know what I mean? It's sort of that tit for tat boxing. So that's why he sort of more adopted that type of style. But I know he's got levels to him, that kid. And Jason Mallier, just a sensational talent, very silky, very sort of it's almost watching poetry in motion when he boxes. Very, very nice to watch. And they're 2 kids where I'd love to. I don't know what their plans are, and I actually do have a rough idea on sort of what they're planning. But eventually I'd love to sort of see them in the pros and fight under us. Even, mate, that'd be an absolute honor.
I think with Tokyo Olympics coming up, that would be such a good opportunity for those guys to qualify for that, and then get that notoriety, do well, represent themselves well, and then have that platform to then get a bit of a name for themselves.
And you'd get a much bigger contract if you if you went to the Olympics and medaled. You'd look at some type of sort of yearly wage. You'd be looking at sort of 3 to sort of 5 times that of your average boxer, and obviously sponsorship and all that sort of stuff is a lot easier as well. So, but again, if you even make the Olympics, you wouldn't get anything sort of like that. But you still sort of get double to sort of triple your average boxer per fight as for your purse. And yeah, mate, but the thing is, what's so heartbreaking is like with the Olympics, now that it's so close, I'd advise all the boys to have a red hot crack at it, especially all the ones that put so many of the years of their life into it. But a lot of the times it's very heartbreaking, because those sort of tournaments are very, very fickle. You know what I mean? And, you get it one dodgy decision, it's like 4 years of your life that you put in, just to a dodgy decision that's happened over like a 5-minute radius. It's just
Are you saying
very tough.
when you could have been building a record in the pros?
Yes, and getting paid the whole way through, and it's in the amateurs. I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but it's actually against the law to get paid. Like as a promoter, if I had an amateur on, I am not allowed to pay them $1. So it's tough, and
it is a hard life.
Mate, you don't. I wouldn't know, unless sort of like the government really pulls their finger out. I wouldn't really like. I'm not a fan of it. I really have a lot of faith in the guys running it in Australia, like the Brizzy brothers, all them guys. They're a blessing, mate. They're the reason why it stayed alive, period, with their super limited resources and, no help whatsoever. And, to even a form of neglect, really. These guys have been, week in, week out, putting on these shows and, making sure all the boys have fights. And Cam, so yeah, mate, it's really it's really sad to see, because it does affect us at the next level in the pros, because guys turning pro with, like Dwight, look at all our top guys at the moment. Michael Zarafa, he had 10 amateur fights. Dwight Ritchie, 10 amateur fights. The list goes on and on and on. I can name another half a dozen. And these guys have had 10 amateur fights. So when you say, when every time an Aussie steps up to the world stage, they get smashed. Well, what would you expect? The kid's had 10 fights. He's fighting a guy of 300. And not only that, but that kid's he's a full-time fighter. He's got his nutritionist covered. He's got his trainer covered. Whereas Dwight Ritchie, he went to work on Monday after Tim Zoo, full-time. You know what I mean? He works full-time. For real.
Oh,
so
man.
It's sad, mate, and how it sort of puts us at that sort of, second tier spot where, it's very hard to get over these guys that basically have the red carpet laid out for them.
Yeah. And you've put that so well. And anyone who's listening to that, they can really get a good understanding of why that's going on with our boxers in the moment. But in saying that, if I paint it with a positive brush, I think that combat sports in Australia is really on the rise. Really on the rise.
The last 3 years, I was speaking to my old man, because he obviously got a good, he's got a good memory of how the sport was even 10 years before I got in the scene. So I've done my 10 years from, say, 2010, and he remembers it from obviously years and years, decades before that. And he was saying since sort of like the mid 80s to sort of like 1990, he said, I've never seen boxing with this much of a buzz. And that's professional boxing. Yeah. So professional boxing, at the moment, we're seeing like a lot of like celebrities where it's like Kim Kardashian having these little corporate fights, and a lot of sort of guys, like a lot of footy players too. Look at Taylor Harris, look at the next fight with Barry Hall and Paul Gallen.
Paul Gallen, yeah.
Like we see that sort of positivity, like it's just amazing. And I remember sort of when the tide started to turn for us, and it was that year in 2017 where we had a monster year. Well, I think it started with Greenie versus Mundine too. So that was massive on, a massive local buzz. Then we had McGregor Mayweather, which was world internationally, probably like just the buzz we had internationally. I think the whole world stopped for that fight. And then on the back end of that year, we had Jeff Horn beat Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah.
And I remember like we just opened up our gym, and when these fights were happening, we were seeing like, a dozen sign-ups, like literally 20 grand in sign-ups in a day, the next day. So that was this first sign where you started thinking, mate, like there's a lot more, G-pop, that has sort of shown interest in the sport as opposed to just the same old sort of stale scene, and I sort of really started seeing it pick up since then. And then last year in 2018, next buzz again, like then it was just all just guys that just looking at, having, just getting fit through boxing. And I think boxing went all the way up to number 2 in the fitness industry, second to yoga, as far as people's, general interest in it as far as getting fit.
It's a not a fad though. I don't find with boxing. It's not a fad.
Yes.
It's not one of those things that just comes and goes. I find that once you start it, and as we were talking about before, once you get the buzz for it, it's really addictive, and also the benefits are just unbelievable. And now you're seeing every man and his dog wanting to come and join in a boxing gym or just do some MMA combat sports. They're watching it on TV. They're realizing all the benefits of it, and it's really good. And I see combat sports in Australia going up from here. We're seeing the boys in the UFC coming up and doing really well. We had Robert Whittaker fight on the weekend. Jake Matthews won his fight. Were you watching the UFC?
Yeah, that Alessandro. Well, he boxed at the Pavilion. He kickboxed and done some MMA. So, that...
Adesanya,
Yeah. So I'm not big on the MMA, mate. I don't really watch a whole lot of it. I'm sort of just, all day, every day with the boxing. But overall, like with combat sports, definitely I see a bit of a buzz. And it's crazy because we're at a time now where sports in general is dying. You know, we see the rugby league, the cricket, they're all on their knees to a point where, you know, you can chuck on the TV on any given day and see a commercial of basically funded by the government asking people to, like kids to play cricket. Have you seen it? Playcricket.com, playrugby.com. When did we ever see that as kids? Would you ever see the government preaching at kids to try? You're already out there. Exactly right.
I was playing with my kids. I wasn't on my iPad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in a world where like esports is taking over real sports, and you know, like it's to see a sport rising, and not only that, a predominantly dead sport rising through the ashes there. And I think I know why that is. And I think it's because, you know, we sort of got outlawed, you know, years and decades ago from like, you know, the general public through, you know, the networks and whatnot. And now the networks are dead. So no one's watching TV anymore. So people are starting to watch what they really want to watch. They jump on YouTube and they watch what they want to watch. And since the beginning of time, we've always seen that people are happy to pay more money for boxing than any other sport. When have you ever paid $50, $100 to watch the footy, soccer, anything? You'd never pay, you think it was crazy if they asked you for $5. You think, you know, whereas boxing, people produce $100, $80 all the time. US too, you know what I mean? So it's another 30% on top of that.
I think there's that, like, they know that the what people are putting on the line with boxing, and that the events are more specialized as well. But I think in terms of the media, that's a really good point that you raised, because with that media, the mainstream media dying and alternative media making a massive, like it's usurping mainstream media for sure. People are definitely tuning into what they want to watch, rather than just being force-fed information by mainstream media.
Whereas back in the day, we had half a dozen channels, and whatever they're playing on that channel that time is what you could watch. You didn't even have your phone to just, or you didn't have anything to even distract you. You had the radio and you had that. You know what I mean? Whereas now, people don't go on networks anymore, to the point where we're seeing the whole sport develop, even at the highest level. Look at Matchroom, probably the biggest promotional company in the world. They're looking at, and even Top Rank, ESPN Plus, DAZN, all streaming. No more, big networks with, you know, Sky, or big networks with, you know, at the local where it was, you know, Channel 7, Ringside TV back in the day. So, you know, that's becoming more and more relevant. Even Fox Sports, like they were, when I first started, that's what it was all about. Get on Fox Sports, get on live. They give you X amount of money and there's X amount of exposure. You get X amount of sponsors. These days, mate, people are knocking back Fox Sports. Is there like a Netflix that you would say in that mold for combat sports? At the moment, I believe Epicenter are the closest thing to that. I think epicenter.com, I think it's just .com. They're really got their head around, you know, making it really easy for your general person to jump on and get his head around the professional boxing schedules in Australia. They're doing majority of the pro game in the country, and they're also picking up things like second tier sports. So it might be like hockey, you know, things that were never in mainstream media, but, you know, again, still have a bit of a following, you know, VFL and that sort of stuff. They're picking up a lot of that. And just generally, like, they're getting a good sort of sports following, you know, and we're seeing, and we did, I believe I spoke to Adam Watt the other day, and he said that now every pub and club in Victoria, I think there was about 1,200, have just picked up all the streams too. So every time one of our nights are on, or Brian or whatever it may be, it's going to be in every pub and club. Fantastic. So things like that, you know, slow steps, but it's early days. It's still in development for sure. You know, and just the whole streaming thing and all that, like that's sort of just, everyone's just getting their head around that. And eventually they're going to get, you know, onto subscriptions and that sort of stuff, and just make it really accessible for anyone to watch boxing. And where do you see your promotion going? Because I know Brian was talking about doing shows in China potentially, and sort of going abroad with it as well. Do you see that sort of happening with you as well? Oh yeah. Well, think about it like this. If we just got through talking about streams, then what would be the best countries to stream to? Asia. China, absolutely. India, do some type of bashes here. Mate, at the end of the day, like we heard the other day, we sent one of our boys, Kane Brunton, to China. And he got a close loss, and he's one of the boys that will be sort of a middle tier fighter on our shows. And he went over there, and they were charging, I believe it was $1 US, or just a real small amount of money, and they got nearly 4 million streams. Oh wow! So, and that was, you know, a guy on our shows that was headlining that show. So again, you know, my matchmaker Ty, he goes to and from there all the time. Shanghai, Macau, he's matched for some of the best fighters in the world over there, and he's got a very, very deep network over there. He's also been to India, and he works with me 10 hours a day, every day, side by side. So he works out at the gym. So yeah, mate, we've definitely got our eye on that. And another thing I'd love to sort of look into is, you know, maybe just to steer away from boxing a little bit, would be things like esports. We've also got a collectibles company where we do like super high-end sports cards and Pokemon cards, and we stream them too. So, to a point where, 3 months ago, I actually bought into a production company because we hire full-time cinematographers and producers anyway. We've got them on a full-time wage. So it was like, well, you know what? Let's get a hold of the core here, and then that way we can bring out what we're producing up to another level,
Wow, man, that is so cool. I'm so glad that we've got like really ambitious young entrepreneurial minds like yourself who are at the helm of the boxing game at the moment.
Yeah,
that's awesome, dude.
Well, to be honest with you, mate, like when I got into the boxing, it was very stale. You know what I mean? Like even now, I think the next, at the time, the next youngest promoter to me was like 27 years older than me. And even now it's like 20 years or something like that. Even though I haven't really run the numbers recently. Yeah, mate, it was very stale. It's just sort of like the sport was just sort of like surviving. You know what I mean? And it was just sort of, the fighters weren't really inspired. The shows were getting a little bit stinky. You know what I mean? It was really just heavy A-sider versus B-side that had no chance at all. You know what I mean? Either all Thailanders that flew out that don't really put up much of a fight and, or whatever it may be. We've seen it more and more. And all I did was sort of when I come in was just listen to the customer. And who is the customer? The customer is the person paying. They want to see 50-50 fights. Well, then give them what they want and just see what happens. You know what I'm saying? And you'll find like people, a lot of promoters say, the guys won't take fights and whatnot, but I think if you sort of really engage in their career and you've got a personal relationship with them, you sort of can, bring them up and get their head around how their career is going to unfold. And 50-50 fights are a very important part of their development. You know what I mean? And 50-50 fights are probably better off taking them earlier rather than later than putting 3-4 years of your life, getting punched in the head every day and realizing this ain't for you. That you know what I mean? So it's just about developing that relationship, developing that trust, and really just getting their head around the overall plan, and they will follow the plan. They don't mind that. As a matter of fact, the problem was no one had any planning.
No one had a plan.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just sort of like one fight at a time, and then they might not fight for 8 months. Then they get a fight again. You want to fight your hardest fight yet? And it's like, dude, I haven't been active. I haven't been training. I've had 2 weeks notice. And that's where you find that there's not really, people
So when you're
up.
trying to look after a pro fighter, especially like the young ones, you're sort of you're sitting them down and saying, all right, this is what we want. Or this is what we forecast for you over the next few years. This is who you're going to fight. And then this is where you could be. Is that what you're doing?
Well, I'd actually ask them what they want out of it first, because every account's different. Mate, you can get a guy where he might come in and say, you know what, it's my dream to have a pro fight. I just always wanted to have a pro fight. I've had my 20 amateurs. I haven't fought in the amateurs for X amount of years or whatever. I'm healthy, I'm fit, I passed all my medicals. I want to have a pro fight, and that's all I'm really going to do. So that fight there, I'd advise him, mate, that's going to be your world title fight. So we're going to get a 50-50 fight. We're going to try and build it up as much as we can. We're going to try and, and really take a risk on it. Whereas a guy that comes to me says, well, I've just come out of the amateurs. I'm looking at having a 10-year career or whatever it may be. We might say, all right, well, we want to fight you 4 times this year. So the first one might be against this veteran guy that will give you good rounds, but he's not really a threat to sort of hurting you or anything like that. So we can back you up 8 weeks later and get you another one, and it'll just sort of be that type of plan. So it really depends on the account, and sort of what they want out of it too.
Awesome. So I'll try and use an example. Like I met Khalid Baker on the weekend, and he's a guy who's doing pretty well for himself at the moment. He's a little bit older, because he went away for a few years, and now he's in the pros. He's holding the Victorian strap right now, right?
I believe it's the regional Victorian, which is just the one just underneath it. But yep.
Right. And so when you sort of look at him as an example, how do you map out his career?
He's a difficult one, and he's actually one of probably the toughest examples, because where I find him tough is obviously before he got falsely charged and put away for a decade, he was actually a lightweight. So he's a 60-kilo fighter, right? So his natural side, but don't get me wrong, he would have still been developing and filling out and whatnot, because he was only, I think, like a teenager or early 20s. So, he filled out, and now he's a cruiserweight, 90 kilos, which is a huge jump in boxing. And again, very inactive. He had 10 years in prison, so you're not really going to get fights there, are you? He might have had his fair share of fights, but, I'm talking boxing fights here.
None on the record.
Yeah, none on the record.
All off the record.
Exactly right. So he's a tough one because he's very inactive. He's obviously come up, well, when he started, that is. He's come up the better end of, 8, 10 divisions, whatever it may be. And and obviously there's also a lot of attention on him. I think 60 Minutes rocked up to his last fight. So there's all these cameras and a lot of attention, a lot of pressure. So raising someone like him, I would say, mate, you know, we have to start at the bottom. We have to go to the guys that sort of, you know, at the lowest level, because I mean, this is at the start of his career, not now. He's developing now and he's sort of stepping it up as he goes every fight. But someone like him, you'd say, listen, we don't know how you're going to hold this weight. We don't know how, if you're still got it as a boxer, because it's been a long time, and it's fair enough to sit him down, and you want to have these sort of chats with your promoter, because it's like, ain't no one else going to be having them with you. Everyone else is going, yeah, don't worry, mate, go, do it, yeah, give it a go. Like, mate, this kid could get very hurt. He could die. You know what I mean? If he's misinformed, then he's not really made aware of all the risk and made aware of exactly what the plan is going forward. So someone like him, mate, it'd be like Brian's having a field day with him because of the media and all that. And all. Right. For your average 4-round boy, you don't really get that type of media. You know what I mean? No matter of fact, you'd be lucky to make your local paper after his first win. Whereas Khalid, he's really sort of intertwined that negative experience in with his newfound life and turned it all around. And it's made him
hungry as well.
Bloody
I follow him on Instagram as well, and a nice guy as well.
Yep.
I met him, a really nice fella.
Yep.
And yeah, he looks like he's really hungry, and he's just, obviously if you spent that long in prison with something you didn't do, you get out of it and you're like, just life.
I got ground to make up. And he's an inspiration, mate. Like, I've heard so many people ask about him, and again, for his level of where he's at in boxing, he shouldn't have this much attention. But because he's sort of his circumstances, mate, the way he's turned around something where, let's be honest, mate, if I'd done 10 years and I'd find it very hard to find motivation. Like, I'd give up on the world a little bit. You know what I mean? I'd have that sort of attitude where it's like, you know, well, majority of people would. It's very hard to get, once you've sort of got that negative momentum, just like positive momentum, it's very hard to sort of turn it around. You know what I mean? And to see him turn around to a point where he's made it actually work for him, mate, that's so good to see. And boxing is actually littered with stories like that. Right. You go talk to people with boxers, like pro fighters. How many people you think you turn around saying, oh, yeah, I'm from Brighton. I know my family was always, you know, my mum and my dad and private school, and I just want to be a boxer. It's probably 1 in 100. Most of them are, I had a kid at 15. I was either on drugs, selling drugs, or I was doing bad things or whatever it may be. That's where they've come out from. So that's why I was such a, you know, big ambassador for the sort of, you know, the youth that from sort of, you know, that haven't really had the same opportunities as others, to push boxing on them, because it's a great outlet.
Often it comes through channeling pain of some sort.
Yes,
definitely.
Yes, because you're that's what you're expressing in the ring. Right. You're expressing pain. You got to, if you don't have any of that in you, you got nothing to sort of dig in when the going gets tough. You got nothing to grip onto. Do you know what I'm saying?
And that's when the perceptions of boxing and combat sports become counterintuitive, because people think that, you know, there's some of the people that maybe are involved in it or are fighters or whatever from certain areas, but that's their salvation, you know, and that's the beauty of it, is that people are getting a lifeline from boxing.
Exactly. As opposed to manifesting that energy for more negativity. Exactly. They've actually stopped and turned it around. I remember a lot of these guys didn't have the opportunities from the get-go. They didn't, like, these guys were born, like, again, from like immigrant families, no money, commission, you know what I mean? Never really educated well. So what would you have them people do? You just turn your back and put your head in the sand and just sort of pretend they're not there. You know what I mean? If you find a positive way for it to all channel, it's, you'll find that, you know, a lot of this sort of negative energy can be turned into positive energy. And a lot of sort of the high-end gyms, I know Paul would probably be the same here, or anyone else. Like, mate, if guys are out there and if you're training someone in there, had a, you know, fighting on the street or whatnot, mate, Paul would give him a drilling. You know what I mean? And
mate, he's at Frank Dando's sports academy, martial arts academy. Yep. Do you know what that school is? It's like a school for young boys who don't really fit into the system. Yep. And they go there and they do English and maths, and then they just do combats, but they just do martial arts. So Paul is a really big ambassador for that stuff, and very inspirational guy as well, man.
Yeah, mate. Paul, I've been dealing with Paul since 2013. I remember he had Joe D'Angelo. Do you know Joe?
No, I don't.
Yeah, he's one of Paul's early fighters. He come and boxed an undefeated kid from my old gym, Mark Pante, and for the Victorian title. And since then, mate, it's funny, I was talking to Paul about last week, because we obviously got two of the boys from here fighting. We've got Troy Bullock and Dean Borg. Yep. And on our next show next Friday on October 18th. And Paul, I was actually having a chat with him. He's only had about half a dozen of his boys fight throughout the years, because he's also in the kickboxing a bit. He obviously runs multiple gyms, and, you know, he also works as a teacher. So he only had about half a dozen boys in that time, but I don't think he's ever lost a fight. He had Cam box Andrew Wallace for the state title. He's had Troy box a few times, and mate, every time he's just been an absolute gentleman to deal with, and real pro, you know, and obviously an inspiration to me in a gym sense, because he obviously leading the way in the gymnasiums, especially sort of the combat gymnasiums. You know, I've always looked at, you know, FightFit as a brand and thought, you know, mate, like, that's just that next level, you know what I mean? Middle of the CBD, the biggest facilities, you know, all you guys are real pros, Bash and all them. Like every time I dealt with him, mate, the same hour, you know what I mean? That's how I like to do. I action everything. I'm super, you know what I mean? Like just on the ball. And when you deal with pros, you really appreciate that professionalism as opposed to dealing with guys that, you know, it takes 3 days to do something that's meant to take 30 minutes, you know?
Right,
so,
exactly.
Sure.
No, I think in terms of, you know, the business model side of things, that's spot on, man. But also in terms of, you know, Paul as an example of a person that is just no bullshit whatsoever. There's just no bullshit with him. What you see is what you get. He'll hold you accountable. And that's the beauty of a young man walking into a boxing gym who has X amount of insecurities or all of these things going on in his life, in his personal life, maybe getting in trouble with the police. When he goes to school, he's that guy. Yeah. When he goes to work, he's that guy. When he goes to university, if he wants to do that, he's that guy. In the street, he's that guy. But when you come into a boxing gym, everyone's the same. You leave whatever it is at the door, and you leave, you know, your ego at the door or your insecurities or whatever, and everyone's the same there, which is the beautiful part of a boxing gym. And that's why so many people have been able to find, you know, so much goodness from competing in martial arts.
Yeah,
or
and
just
I think
practicing it.
A good coach, like, especially if you're getting a kid with a bit of talent and probably got a bit of a future, it's the idea is to get him in and strip back the ego and fill him with positive confidence. You know what I'm saying? Get rid of that, you know what I mean? Like that sway almost, that negative.
That bravado that you need in the streets.
Exactly. It's to strip that down, and then once you've got that sort of, you know, clean canvas, to sort of install the right ethics and morals. And because remember, boxing is just like any combat sport, mate. It's all mental. 85% is mental. So, you know, a coach that's sort of like, I know you see a lot of these coaches where you get your student in and it's just harder, train harder, train more, train harder. It's like, mate, that just from you whipping that kid doesn't make you any more. Or it doesn't make it doesn't help at all. Like my uncle was one of the best trainers, Keith Ellis, one of the best trainers this country's ever produced. He won Trainer of the Century through the AMBF. So, you know, and he said, he goes, training, he goes, I'm not the best trainer, I'm the best taperer. I know I talk to a kid and I know what gets them going. Like some kids need to be slapped in the corner. Some kids need to be spoken to like this in the corner. Some kids, everyone's different. You know what I mean? He goes, you got to know what gets the best out of them. Right. You got to know what makes them focused. You got to know what, you know, that's the idea of it all. And of course, the training is important, the technical side of it, yes, but majority of it is getting the kid's head right, making him understand that dedication is the key, consistency is the key, you know what I mean? Accountability, all those sort of things, have that sort of installed in them. And mate, that's what makes a great trainer. And that's what Paul does and what all the good trainers do. Whereas, again, like a poor trainer, mate, just cracking the whip and just more ain't necessarily going to make him a better fighter.
You're spot on, man. So I've interviewed, obviously, Paul on here, Dave Hedgecock, Nick Carra, Sam Greco, some of the best sort of trainers that we've got around. And it always comes back to that. It always comes back to you have to tailor that person, the way that you train that person, the way that you speak to that person, to their own unique set of skills, to their own unique personality.
To get the best out of them.
To get the best out of them.
Exactly.
And I'm sure it's the same from a promoter's point of view as well.
Absolutely, mate.
And the fact that you sit someone down and you say, this is sort of like how you achieve longevity, if that's what you want, or this is how you have the best fight, if you want to just have that one world title fight, that's also really important. And it's important to have that care for people. And I'm glad that you guys are doing that.
Well, it all just comes back down to like the development of that athlete. You know what I mean? And obviously the trainer has more, I mean, I'm a big fan of like with the teams I deal with, like Paul's a great example where Paul would say, there's the boy, I train him, the kid's going to come in fit, ready and given 100%. And I now need you to do your job, which is pick him a fight and ensure he's not mismatched. That's it. You know what I mean? So the trainer does the trainer's job, the fighter does the fighter's job, the promoter does the promoter's job. The counts I find the most difficult is when they're trying to mingle in. And what happens is over time, sometimes you might get a kid who's fully receptive to everything you're saying. Once he gets to 10-0, there starts becoming some bigger and better offers. All of a sudden, mates in his ear, they're like, oh, you're invincible, or mate, then all of a sudden they start thinking different and they start thinking they know better than you. And it's like, mate, unfortunately, a lot of the times I've got to let them learn the hard way because I'm stripped from the power, you know what I mean? And I don't necessarily shield anyone, I give them advice and let them just sort of disperse. That's the best, with my experience of sort of what you know about me. If you trust me, you'll go full steam ahead with it. If you sort of don't, you think you know better, who am I? You know what I mean? It ain't against the law to do what you think, right. You know what I mean? So, and at times, mate, like we see like promoters and, ruin careers, mate. Like, there was this one promoter that come on the scene a few years ago and, you look at this talent that he got wiped out of boxing where you're looking at like the Ballas and like Will Tomlinson and like Jeff Horn, like all being beaten on the same person, under the same person. You know what I mean? It's like, how can you get that so wrong? You've got Olympians, world champions, and they're all getting knocked out in mismatches. How's it possible? You know what I mean? And it really gets you scratching your head. Whereas guys like, a good promoter can get a guy that, doesn't have much talent at all and still put him in a very, very, fair fight, a very fan-friendly fight where you probably tell me yourself where you've seen guys in the corporate show, some of the most entertaining fights you'll see. Two blokes having a crack. What's wrong with that?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Chins up in the air and whatnot, but it just makes it more exciting. But you sort of bite, on the edge of your seat the whole time. Like, it's just like, so as long as you know what you're doing, you don't necessarily need the big names or the biggest, if you understand styles, and that's where majority of my knowledge comes from, just watching styles and watching, thousands and millions even of rounds and just, and levels, understand the levels, because style, like, mate, you can get an upright boxer, you get a fighter, whatever it may be, but then there's levels to that too. There's Mike Tyson, and then there's your local bloke that's had 200 fights that likes to have a bang, or an Islander kid that's just sort of got a bit of an idea, can really whack naturally, but the levels are obviously, chalk to cheese. So you've got to understand that level. Whereas a lot of people will see, and I see it a lot of times with trainers as well, they'll see that his boy will have a great fight and they're all of a sudden, we're going to beat him, we're going to beat him, we're going to beat him, we want to fight him next. It's like, Jesus. Yeah. Like, calm your farm. We're going to, you know what I mean? Like, one thing at a time. Like, sprint. That's it. So, but boxing's very, very, very hard to understand. There's a lot that goes into it. On the outside looking in, it's simple. Two meatheads bashing each other. But that's not what it is, mate. It's a science. It's a sweet science. You know what I mean? There's a lot that goes into it, mate. Even you, like I said, you've only had the one fight, but you train a while. Every time you walk into a gym, mate, you meet someone new, they can teach you something new. You know what I mean? Footwork to head movement to your reaction to your technique to whatever it may be, mate. There's so much that goes into it.
I'm a sponge for that because my skills are just novice compared to the coaches and stuff in here. Yep. Mate, they I'll sometimes, it's so funny because when I first started training here, I used to just sponge off Cam Eyes, he'd be doing his shadow boxing and trying to work out the poor bloke, and I'd come and annoy him and come and shadow box next to him so when you do that, and you got other guys like Eric Diamondstein, he just helped me out. But and I think surrounding yourself around good pros. I remember at the end of the day, a good combat sports gym should have good combatants. At the end of the day, if they're getting around saying, kickboxing, we hear all the time where you get fitness gyms, starting boxing. It's like, hang on, if you're a CrossFit gym, how is it possible that you could teach an 800-year-old sport and you've got a PT certificate? Some of the pad holding videos I've seen from those gyms are just brutal, man.
Oh yeah, they're rough. They're rough. And
I hope people don't think they can get in a street fight after that.
Oh yeah, and it's sad because it's like, mate, in my boxing gym, I'm not exactly getting around promising people, how to climb Tarzan ropes and all that like they do in the CrossFit or anything really. It's just the boxing. You know what I mean? And I think a good tell if your gym's a good one or a poor one is to sort of look around and see what combatants have come out of it. You know what I mean? Just to look into the trainer's history a little bit and look at your gym here where you've got Eric Diamondstein, you've got Dinesh, who I always followed very close. Yeah. He was a crowd pleaser to say the least.
As Paul Fifield says, the only problem with Dinesh, he thinks that defense is the thing between yours and your neighbor's house.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I remember one fight. There was probably about 4 knockdowns in the first round.
That was crazy. I remember that round.
Against, was it Callum Orchard. I don't know how I remember that. I haven't said his name in 10 years or something. But yeah, I had like 5-6 multis into it, and I was probably 17 and I had like 30 grand right on the fight, but against Dinesh. So I was like, I didn't know who he was. He was like his first fight, or he had one fight interstate. So I had no idea who he was. It was Orchard. I knew he was a bit of a puncher. And like they were both going down and down and down, because back in the day was that fight bet where they'd give like ridiculous odds to local boxing. And even at 17, I was really with it on the local scene, and they'd give like ridiculous odds, like 4-1, where it should be like $1.50. So I was making like ridiculous money in my late teens, just smashing fight bet. And yeah, mate, to the point where now these days I'm banned from every single sporting agency, sports bet, Ladbrokes.
Yeah, you would be.
We're in like court with a few of them as well, like because of like, not for me, I'm suing them, like trying to get some money that they've just held back for no real reason.
Really?
And, you know what I mean? Like it's just crazy, man. Like the betting thing, like we sort of started that when we were like 15, and to a point where like if anyone's out there and they've got like a bookie license, I'm your man, mate. I want to start taking bets myself, mate, because we've been like so accurate to the point where, because that's why we're banned. We're not banned because of any dodginess. It's just that we're too accurate. Yeah. So in turn, they refuse to take bets of us. Yeah, that's all it is. So yeah, mate, we're I'd love to sort of get into like take a bet, because I think it does add to the atmosphere. It does add to the experience.
It gives you an added element. I'm not a gambling man myself, but it definitely does give you an extra added element. You're talking about Dinesh though. We've got plenty of other ones as well, man. We've got, as you said, Eric, Cam Eyes, Dinesh. Christian Enor's another great one. We've got Nick Carra over at Collingwood as well. We got like...
Well, Chris, I've been dealing with Chris, mate. He's like one of my closest friends in boxing, and he's actually got Costa fighting and Matty Abdullah, little Matty. So between
he's slick, that little Matty kid. I've been seeing him doing work around here, and I've like...
it's just a matter of now Chris is trying to get him to make the transition from pros to amateurs. It is a big jump. You know what I mean? Maybe setting up his shots a bit more, get his head around that. The duration that is obviously double the length now, so you can sort of sit on your shots and set them up, as opposed to just trying to touch every hole, like every opportunity.
He's in great hands though.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. Chris is a great trainer, mate. And I remember him back when he was in Caulfield. Like we were where the guys actually put Zarafa and Shade and all the pros he had back there. Onto him, and then he obviously had the transition and sort of had to move around a little bit. So he's in the process now of sort of building that protein back up. He's got Kane Clark as well, probably one of the strongest light welterweight in the country. I've never seen I don't recall a light welterweight probably since like Cam Eyes or one of these guys that are just so fit and so strong. You know what I mean? And so yeah, mate,
he's a beast.
Yeah, Chris is Chris, and he's a gentleman of a bloke, isn't he? He's just a top bloke, honest, straight shooter, just an absolute gentleman, isn't he?
One of my first sessions here, I didn't know who the hell I was, but I'd forgotten my training shorts, and he gave me a pair of shorts and told me to keep them. I still wear them.
They weren't the ones he was wearing, were
they? He took the pants off his... No, they were in his bag, luckily. I wouldn't want him to walk around in just his jocks. But... So I talked about Khaled Baker before.
Yes.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got guys like Malia, like Garside, like Honey. Is it Honey or Hooney?
Hooney, I think.
Hooney.
Yes.
Justice Hooney. I wouldn't want to pronounce his name wrong. Make mincemeat out of me. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got those guys who you'd imagine would be turning pro in the next few years. How do you manage that talent?
Well, a lot of them, like if you just, there's many sort of like, again, another one is probably a good... one to base that off is something like Ibi Bella, where under Brian Amachuda, he was getting, the right fights at the right time. Because remember, if you're happy to go put, 10, 15 years into your boxing as an amateur, why a lot of those guys, when they turn pro, they feel like they're too good for a lot of the levels. So they try and go, bang, they try to do the Lomachenko. And my whole thing is, look at Lomachenko, the greatest amateur ever, couldn't see 2-0. So if he can't see 2-0, anyone can be beaten. And it doesn't matter how good of an amateur you are, you should always go through the gears, because at the end of the day, your first pro fight, it might not be about how good your opponent is, but it's the first time you're getting punched in the face without a head guard. Well, these days, the elites don't wear head guards, but 3-4 years ago, or 2 years ago, that was the case. 10-ounce gloves or 8-ounce gloves. The crowds are usually 4 or 5 times, if not 10 times that of your average, amateur crowd, the weigh-ins the day before, so many little factors into it. So why, in your first couple of fights, would you want to go and fight the best of the best and just, fast track it all? And even if you get the wrong wins, like look at Jake Carr, where he got an Australian title in his third fight and it actually warehoused him. You know what I mean? To the point where he was too good for the 4 and 6 round boys, but he wasn't quite good enough for the next level boys. So what happens? No fights. Just sits around being a sparring partner. You know what I mean? And you
Third
don't.
fight, hey?
What's that?
Third fight.
His third or fourth fight, whatever it was, he beat
so
Serjanic.
good, man.
And what an achievement. Like, I'm not downgrading that achievement at all. That is astonishing, you know, especially at that weight where the Australian title is, you know, really sought after in the lower divisions and whatever. They're not, there's obviously just not that big of a pond. So, you know what I mean? The field is just a lot smaller, whereas that division was rich, mate. Serjanic was like 26-3 or something at the time, fighting a guy that's had 3 fights. Crazy, amazing achievement. But the wrong wins can even steer you wrong. Right. So my whole thing is, you know, always just sort of come into it. Now, obviously, again, depends on sort of the levels. If you want me to use an example for just Jason Marley or just this person or just that person, I can give a bit more, you know, a bit more specific. But, you know, overall, it's just sort of about wherever you are, mate, knock it down 2 gears and let's start there. Right. You know, I've got a kid, Tweesy. His second name, so I always forget it, but he's just come from the Commonwealth Games. He's a heavyweight. You know, he beat Joseph Goodall to the Commonwealth Games. And Joseph Goodall was obviously the first person to medal in 30 years in the World Championships, just as Justin did, same sort of thing. And he beat him and, you know, again, he sort of turned a pro, and I had the same sort of chat with him. He had a few years out. He only, you know, done boxing for a couple of years, only had 20 amateur fights. So my whole thing was, you know what, we have to sort of get your first couple out the way. And he was obviously being a fighter. Man, I just want to, you know, give me the best guys that you get me. And that's what you want out of your fighters. You have that sort of mentality. Anyone, anywhere, anytime, ready for anything. But it's up to us. It's for them to be brave and us to be smart. It's no good me being more brave than the fighter. You know what I mean? Chucking him in fights that he can't win, or chucking him in, you know, just for my own ego, or trying to prove a point with another promoter.
It's better off if you do get to that Australian strap sort of level and you're 10-0.
Exactly.
And you've got a good record to boast.
We've got Mark Schliebs, exactly what we did with him. And then from there, you get a regional, and then you can actually be rated. People don't even know this. Like, this would be news to guys that have been in the sport for 30 years, but you can't get rated unless you've had at least 10 pro fights. And no one would even know that, like as simple as that. You know, they don't understand how sanctions work and how the ratings work. And remember, the person doing the ratings, even if say we'd use the IBF, because my dad won the IBF world title, it's always been a close title to my heart. Or there's another one of your fighters, Faisal. He was a gun mate back in his day. He nearly beat Michael Zarafa at the Melbourne Pavilion. I was there that night. I think he lost a split decision. But yeah, mate, like overall, it's just a simple case of like, you know, really getting your head around the fighter's mentality, you know, and what's best for him and what gets him to tick, and sort of have a structure to make it, you know, to suit him, and at the same time, develop him in a way where it suits you too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, awesome, man. So you've just got to have that longevity about you, hey? And just got to know all the ins and outs, and have somebody like yourself or Brian Armatruda really looking after you.
Yep.
How do you see, because Bilal Arkawai was a guy who had a fair bit of hype behind him, but he went off and was with Canelo's team and all that, and he was winning fights, but he recently lost his first fight, didn't he? And
boxing, mate, very unforgiving sport. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like the footy where if you get a loss, you can just sort of, you know, dust it off, come back again next week. It's a loss, especially in modern boxing, where you've got the what I call the Mayweather effect, where that mantle of invincibility is that important. It's at a point where it's a necessity. You lose a fight, like look at Jeff Horn, lost his Rafa, retire. What do you mean retire? The bloke's lost to Crawford and that's it. Now he's lost to Zarafa, it's over. You know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy. The bloke's, you know, in his early 30s, like what is that all about? You know, a year ago you're talking about the greatest, you know, fight the greatest fight Australia's ever produced, or definitely the best win Australia's ever had against Manny Pacquiao. We never had a bigger win than that. You know, maybe second would be maybe a lot of us fighting Harada or you know a Zoo versus Zab or what, you know, Zab Judah, whatever it may be. But nothing comes close to beating Manny Pacquiao. So how can you be in 2017, you know, greatest fighter of all time and blah blah, to a year later retire on one loss? But it's very unforgiving.
How do you
sport.
see that playing out?
As
the
Zarafa rematch?
Zarafa and Horn rematch.
Well, I said in an interview before the first one that, you know, a jump from welterweight to middleweight is a big jump. And, you know, I was in an interview with actually Michael, he sparred Dwight Ritchie at my gym. And I said, you know, I think that, you know, it's a great conflict of styles, which is what we saw. We saw, you know, Horny coming forward, trying to close the distance, trying to smother Michael. And we saw Michael sort of on the back for trying to keep that range, trying to keep that distance and sort of land the bigger, heavier blows, being the middleweight. And it was always going to be a case of if Jeff can really hurt him, because Jeff fighting that style, that rugged, in-your-face style, you need to sort of be able to overwhelm him with your physicality, with your power. And jumping up to middleweight, I just wasn't sure that was even possible. Like, I know you're probably on paper another
much
level to
harder
Michael
sort of
before that first fight.
to you really throw your weight around, hey?
Yes. Well, there's a reason why there's divisions.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's 2 divisions right there. So he's jumped 2 divisions and he beat a Mundine. He knocked out Mundine, and I think that gave him a potential false sense of security jumping in with a full-blown, young, hungry middleweight. And Michael Zarafa, mate, there's not many more people more dedicated than him. Let me tell you, like I said, he turned pro under us.
Hey?
I've kept an eye on him. I've known him for 10 years. And that bloke there, mate, one dream. You know what I mean? That's it. Nothing else. You know,
That's
he's
awesome.
really, really focused. So I knew you were getting a kid that was coming in ready, that had his whole life leading to that point. You know what I mean? And when you sort of include the weight and even the styles, like at the end of the day, typical boxer versus fighter type style, boxer versus brawler, you know? And I think the rematch will probably go more the same, you know what I mean? But again, like we did hear that Horny wasn't taking it all that serious and maybe overlooked him, and that's all the excuses they're coming up with. So if he comes up another level, mate, he certainly can win. We saw him hurt Michael a few times in the 3rd round in particular, had him shook a little bit. But, you know, just on the outside looking in, if I had to call it, I'd probably say Michael would probably win the rematch. And, you know, I work close with all of them, you know, Sam LeBruna, Glenn Rushton, he trains Joel Camilleri, my next main event. So, you know, we're all close, and I don't really like to give, you know what I mean? I don't like to badmouth any fighter, but the bottom line is, or even make an official prediction, because it's almost like you're spitting in someone's face. But just to answer your question, mate, I would think that Zarafa probably should edge it again, and sort of based off the first one, he did just look a little bit too big, too strong, and I don't really see how Horn's going to, you know what I mean, get over that, you know?
Right. Awesome. Well, man, thank you so much for coming in today. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to collaborating in the future and interviewing some of the fighters that you know as well, and, you know, getting some names out there.
Oh, I love that, mate. And we really appreciate it, mate. All the support we can get, we appreciate.
Yeah, of course. As I said, thank you so much. Do you want to maybe just let everyone know where they can find you and, you know, Team Ellis and yourself?
Yeah, mate. Well, just Team Ellis on Instagram, Team Ellis on Facebook. We also got Team Ellis Gym. So, yeah, whatever you're sort of interested in, if it's more just a fitness buzz, get onto the gyms. And if it's the events and you want to watch some, you know, live boxing or even non-live boxing, Team Ellis Boxing, Facebook and Instagram is where you can get all the information.
Awesome.
Legend, mate.
Man. Thank you so much, brother. Good on you guys. Thank you very much.
Mate.
Bye.